SadhGuru, a Grahastha yogi, carries the same intensity, insight, wisdom, and passion as the ancient sages to bring well-being to every individual. A mystic, yogi, visionary humanitarian, and poet, SadhGuru is a spiritual master with a difference. Traversing seamlessly from the ancient to the ultra-modern, he bridges the gap between the known and the unknown, enabling all those who encounter him to explore and experience the deepest dimensions of life. Making a clear break from mere customs and rituals, SadhGuru presents the inner dimension in a scientific manner as it is relevant to our times.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Isha Foundation, Penguin and Crossword, I would like to invite you to a very special event. Launch of the book, SadhGuru More Than Alive, by the poet Arundhati Subramaniam. I would like to first invite Kamini Mahadevan, the consultant editor of Penguin India, to tell us a little bit about the book and also about Penguin's new spirituality imprint, Ananda.
As a meditator, Arundhati's awe, admiration, empathy is palpable throughout the narrative. And yet there are also strains of a healthy skepticism, which she very gently expresses in her asides. For many lay and initiated readers interested in spirituality, all this makes the book invitational. It opens the window to Sadhguru's philosophy of life and death and rouses the desire to delve further and perhaps venture on the path he has shown in their own way. I have to say, on a personal note, I did not know about SadhGuru before I started reading and working on this book, but engaging with this rich and beautifully written narrative of Sadhguru's life and experiences has been a joy and life-affirming.
To me, this book is like a struggle, a constant. You see the struggle to find a way into a life that is, when you read it, you just read it as if it's a thriller. You're just being pulled along by a narrative that is startling. It is outrageous at certain points. You put it down in your lap and you say, and then because you can't resist, you pick it up again and you start reading, and you find that you're dragged along by an undertow. It shows you that it is possible to be reverent and it is possible to be engaged without actually sort of falling into this kind of spineless puddle at the feet of the Guru. And this is, I think, the central problem for many of us, that when you think of the word Guru, you immediately get this kind of crawly feeling. What do we expect? Will he expect me to do seva and stuff like that? But from listening to Arundhati talking about him, he seems like a very human person.
May I now request Akbar Padamsee, one of our special guests for this evening and one of the most distinguished artists of our times, to release the book.
I think this book is wonderful. I've been reading it for the last 4 days. And being a painter, images always come to my mind. the image that constantly came to my mind was that it was spiral. A spiral is a circle within a circle within a circle, it's in continuum. And why a spiral? Because we find as a child, as a young man, then later as a businessman who started a poultry farm and even construction business, and finally his enlightenment at the rock near Mysore, in Chamund Hills. And I find the same person always at different light, at different stages of his own development to being at last the SadhGuru. Thank you very much.
May I now invite Arundhati Subramanian, the author of the book, to take the stage.
The only guru I could envisage was the sage in a B-grade Indian mythological movie with a candy floss beard and an air of constipated benignness. Dead gurus were fine. They left behind words that provoked, challenged. That was manageable. But live gurus were unthinkable. Or to put it another way, I knew I didn't have the qualifications, social, cultural, or historical, to deserve them. And yogis? I thought they were a bit like unicorns, near mythic. I thought they were only to be found in remote Himalayan caves or in exotic spiritual literature. The only yogis I knew were the kind who held classes 2 days a week to beat stress and combat diabetes. Then I met SadhGuru. Many things changed in my life after that encounter 6 years ago. I learned, for one, that yogis exist. I mean, real yogis. A picture of him on a motorcycle in a Sunday newspaper supplement also convinced me that he was far too macho. My kind of spiritual guide, I told myself, would have something unmistakably feminine about him, even if he'd committed the unfortunate oversight of being born male. Let me say that my doubts weren't laid to rest all at once. My doubts have subsided and returned, subsided and returned. But every time I meet the Guru himself, my ambivalence invariably drops away. Even if Isha's many new ventures and meditators, myself included, are works in progress, he strikes me time and again as the genuine article. There's nothing phony here. No comforting platitudes, no PR, smarmy, savvy spiritualism. There is a dynamism and stillness about him that I instinctively trust. I think that's the juncture at which I'd like to pause and invite on stage the person who has in fact committed that unfortunate oversight of being born male, but who remains, as I say in the book, the most remarkably alive human being I know. As the subject of this book, he's awed me, he's baffled me, and at times he's exasperated me. But he remains nonetheless very dear to me, as he is, I know, to many people here and elsewhere. I'd like to welcome on stage SadhGuru.
Let me clarify that one point. It was not an oversight. I chose to be a male because if I came with this kind of a face as a female, there won't be much scope.
I'm going to start with a couple of questions that I'd like to get out of the way right away. Questions that I think, came up for me at the time of this book. And I'm going to start with just asking you the fact that I was particularly struck when we were making this book by the fact that you seemed…
You were making. I was taking a walk.
Okay. For someone who was taking a walk, you seemed remarkably disinclined to micromanage what I was doing, which was actually transcribing those conversations and trying to turn some of that into text. I would imagine that for anyone who was actually working on one's life, if that were to happen to me, I know I'd be far more inclined to micromanage the process. And I think this is probably true for many of us, that it's very difficult to know how to strike that kind of balance between how much to manage and how much to let go. How do you work that out? Or does one have to be a mystic for that?
There are two ways to conduct any process or situations of life. One is to try to manage the situation itself. Another is just manage the people, they will manage the situation. So my whole life is just this, I manage the people, they manage the situations. You're talking about being a disciple of the mind. I feel most human beings are using their mind in an extremely rudimentary way to think and confuse, struggle and stress, not to create and manifest. Does that explain?
Are you saying that we were all being managed without us knowing it?
No.
Were you also saying that? That you didn't have to manage the situation, but you could actually just manage people, that's what you were saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that in the course of this book…
I didn't manage your writing, I just managed you. Writing is your business, why should I manage that?
We all felt that the most inspirational thing about this journey was the fact that you don't seem to have any of the trappings of holiness.
Who?
You. Or you didn't before you… at the moment that you discovered yourself. It's a constant reminder that to know yourself you don't seem to need any of the things that we customarily associate with spirituality, or that have come to be associated with it. Religious allegiance of any kind, or the knowledge of scripture. I guess my question is, no, you don't think?
No, it's just that I think these impressions have fallen upon people's minds, mainly because people who should have just been temple priests are claiming to be gurus, that's why. Just because they happen to be born in a certain caste or creed, they become gurus. They should have just been temple priests doing a certain ritual. Now they claim to be gurus, so naturally they give that impression. And that impression permeates in the society today, unfortunately. Otherwise, just look back and see, any guru of any consequence in the history of this nation or anywhere else for that matter, have they fit into any your ideas or trappings of holiness or nonsense? Have they? Everybody has been a revolution by himself, isn't it? Every one of them. Based on his life, somebody else tries to create a tradition, not realizing that he was a revolution and that's the only way it can happen. When there is a revelation, there is bound to be a revolution. I keep telling people, say, I'm an uneducated guru. People say, no. I said, don't think it's a bad thing. I'm not saying something negative about myself because that's the only qualification I have. Because from the moment you're born, just about anybody around you, your parents, all the adults around you, just everybody is trying to educate you about things that have not worked in their life. Everybody is trying to educate you to remain uneducated, uninfluenced by your parentage, by your genetics, by social situations, the cultural situations, your teachers, your friends, not to be influenced by anything, just to sit here and look at life. If you remain uneducated, you will also get enlightened. That is the qualification I earned. Constantly wherever I went, it is just that I made sure that nobody influences me, because I could clearly see almost everybody is talking about things that they do not know. They don't even know that they don't know, that's a problem. Really. Right now, our ideas of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, whatever is our experience of life, is only happening within ourselves. Unless we look at that mechanism, you are seeing life, knowing life, just the way nature is permitting you to do so. There are many other creatures who are seeing the same situation in a different way, isn't it? So, nature is permitting you to see life only with through a certain keyhole, because for your survival, that's all that's necessary. Only when you become like this, because this is the nature of the human being, that he is not willing to settle for just survival, he wants to be something more. Not knowing that what is that something more, people do all kinds of things. It doesn't matter what they do. Essentially, they are trying to be something more than who they are right now, isn't it? If you want to be something more, you can only be something more here, not there. If you are something more just in the world, when they clap their hands, you will go up, when they do this, you will go down. Somebody else, something else, the social fickleness will determine how you will be. It is just that I refuse to get educated by anybody. I refuse to be influenced even by a single thought or emotion around me. I think that was the most significant thing, and I think that's what I'm trying to put upon everybody, not to be influenced. But people tell me, "SadhGuru, how not to be influenced by you?" I said, that's the thing. That's the whole thing. If you're influenced by me, you will miss me. If you're not influenced by me and you're with me, you will be empowered by me. That's important.
You say that you never really knew what water was and you never really knew what stones were.
Even now I do not know. Do you know?
No, I don't, clearly. But I'm curious to know then what you meant when you say you had this moment on Chamundi Hill at the age of 25, a life, you'll find it in the book if you haven't heard of it already, a life-transforming experience on Chamundi Hill. He went up for a few minutes, for half an hour, and came back 6 hours later, a mystic. What happened on Chamundi?
She's beginning to talk like she writes script in the local cinema.
I think my question is, if this moment is what we call a moment of self-knowledge or enlightenment, you actually go on to talk about it later as a condition of borderless ignorance. So are you saying that the ignorance that existed earlier was just amplified at this point? Because that in itself is a kind of boggling concept.
See, only ignorance can be limitless, isn't it? Can knowledge be limitless? Knowledge is always limited. How much ever you know, it's still limited. But ignorance is boundless, isn't it? So, I'm not trying to be a mystic, okay? She brings up this kind of issues. Ignorance is definitely borderless, boundless. And it is the ignorance which empowers us to search, seek, explore, limitlessly travel through the scape of life. Knowledge would render you to your grave when you're alive. If you're satisfied with what you know, it would render you to your grave very quickly. The grave may not be of stone, usually it is made of paper. They call it scriptures. People just go there and bury themselves in the scripture. You know, you heard this, somebody buried himself into your book. You do. So that's a grave. Wherever you're buried, that's a grave, isn't it? So people bury themselves into this because knowledge just gives you a certain sense of security. Knowledge gives you a certain sense of belonging. Knowledge gives you a certain sense of, I'm somebody. Knowledge gives you a sense of something that you're worthwhile in some way. Knowledge takes away the tremendous possibility of being a worthless speck of dust in this existence that can be just blown anywhere and just be there. The existence is a part of it. Knowledge takes away the possibility of union, which is yoga. Knowledge takes away the possibility of inclusiveness. Knowledge is always exclusive, please see this. The more knowledgeable you become, the more removed you become from everybody. Ignorance is like a sponge, it picks up everything. Knowledge is already heavy, it cannot pick up anything. Even today if I walk on the street, or this moment when I sit here, I'm completely empty-headed at this, like, every time I enter and look at people, I'm absolutely empty. Okay, I look at them, okay, what do they need, and I speak. Not once do I walk into a hall thinking, what will I speak, what will I say? There is no such thing in me because what is there to say? The magnitude of ignorance is stupendous compared to the minuscule nature of knowledge. Just by sheer size, you must put knowledge in the back seat because it's no use. It's just not even comparable in size, is it? The magnitude of ignorance of this cosmic space and the knowledge of what we have about it, is it comparable? You think it's comparable?
I think what fascinated me during this entire process was the fact that SadhGuru turns out epigram after epigram when he talks, and in every second epigram there's a paradox. And as a poet, that of course appealed to me enormously, and I didn't want to ask him to decode each one of them. But this is an opportunity to ask you to at least offer an entry point into some. So the borderless ignorance thing was one. I'm not sure you've totally answered it, but it's one such question. The other one was this point at which you say that faith, this again was a marvelous quotable quote. He says, faith is mature reason and atheism is immature reason. I think what appealed to me about that, of course, was that faith and reason came into the very same definition.
See, right now, we are sitting here, all of us, on a round planet. It's a planet round. Does it sound reasonable to you? And it's spinning, you know, and it's moving at a tremendous speed. And the solar system itself is traveling, we know that now. The whole galaxy is traveling, we don't know what's the speed. Nobody ever passed a milestone to know what speed we're traveling. So in all this, the existence the way it is, you and me sitting here and doing this gospel